Good work, everyone. I'll take that as my cue to get us started. So here we go. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call this meeting of the TRPA Advisory Planning Commission to order. Today is Wednesday, September 13th, 2023. It's 9:31. Thank you all for being here. The first item on the agenda is the roll call to determine the quorum. And Tracy, I'm going to go back to you to do that.
Mr. Kuchnicki?
Present.
Ms. Chandler?
Present.
Mr. Drake? Mr. Drew?
Good morning.
Ms. Ferris?
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson?
Yes.
Mr. Letton?
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Hitchcock?
Here.
Ms. Simon?
Here.
Ms. Stala?
Here.
Mr. Stephen? Mr. Smokey? Mr. Young? Mr. Drake? Mr. Ferry?
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Oh, that's good news. All right. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. Sorry I cannot be there in person today. I stated earlier I'm away at a conference, and Vice Chair Carr is also away at a conference. So we're going back to the old COVID ways here for a meeting, but we will get through it. So thanks again. And I'm going to go over the remote meeting rules of the day. So for members of the public to observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov. Under the calendar header, click on Advisory Planning Commission meeting, hybrid meeting for September 13, 2023. And there you will find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. To address APC members directly with your comments, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking on raise hand at the bottom of your screen. At the appropriate agenda item with your hand raised, you'll be unmuted by TRPA staff and have 3 minutes to address the APC. If you have used the dial-in numbers to join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and you will be unmuted. To my fellow APC members, if you wish to speak, you can also raise your hand in Zoom with the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. Remote APC members may not use the chat box to make any comments or have sidebar conversations. Please remember to mute your microphone. And if you're able to turn your camera on, that would be great. We'd love to see you. A couple more quick notes for today. Mr. Alling, first of all, let me see, is Garth in the room? Sorry.
Yes, Brendan, I'm here.
All right, great. So Garth, thank you so much for reapplying to be the at-large member with Douglas County and for going through what I understand, the extended process with the Douglas County Commission to get reappointed for another 2-year term to the APC. We really, as I understand it, you were affirmatively approved by that commission, but you are not yet approved by TRPA's governing board, which will happen later this month. And therefore you will not be voting in today's meeting, but you are welcome to participate in the meeting today. Just can't vote. And I just wanted to extend my thanks to you for going the extra mile to make it through that process, and that we just really value your work and input on this commission. So thank you. I don't know if you want to say anything really quickly, Garth, or if you want to just leave it there.
Brendan, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm very happy to be back for the next 2 years. It's too bad that Douglas County wasn't able to get things through fast enough in order for me to participate in the meeting today, but I'm happy to be here, looking forward to the next 2 years. And yeah, away we go.
Excellent. Great. That sounds perfect. One other quick note is the Planning 102 training session, which we've been talking about here for a little while, which we understand. We had 2 meeting cancellations, and so we missed the last couple of months, and now quite a few of us are remote. So we decided it would be best to move that 102 Planning 102 training session to October to allow more members to participate. So just note that if you could, we are going to try to do Planning 102 for certain, and it'd be great to do it in person if you're able to for our October meeting, which is next month, obviously. So,
Oh, if I may, I've been waiting for that meeting, but I will be out of town in October, so
okay.
so sorry.
Sorry, Judy, that's okay. And we can, we could follow up. I can talk to Mr. Hester and maybe we can do maybe a one-on-one follow-up with you. or
We're out of state that day, so
just at a later time.
yeah, okay.
Okay. Sounds good. So I'm going to move us on to item 2, which is approval of our agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda, staff?
Mr. Chairman, this is John Hester. No, we do not. And just for the record, 3 additional members have joined since roll call, so we are definitely clear on the quorum, despite Mr. Owens in between status.
Very good. Thank you. And as I understand it, there was an errata sheet that was posted for agenda item 5A. It looks like attachment B, the revised rules of procedure were posted. So I just want to note that for the record. Hopefully everyone was able to see that in their email inbox this morning. Anything further there, Mr. Marshall, that you want to clear up?
No, thank you.
Okay, so I will deem the agenda approved with that amendment for the record. And I'm going to move us on to item 3, which is public interest comments. If any member of the public wishes to address the Advisory Planning Commission at this time, please raise your hand by clicking on the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Please note the Advisory Planning Commission is prohibited by law from taking immediate action on or discussing issues raised by the public that are not on our agenda. And Catherine, I am going to turn this over to you for any public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have no hands raised in person or online to comment on this item.
Okay. I will just note that TRPA has a new inbox for public comments, I believe, which is publiccomment@trpa.gov for any members of the public. I think they're trying to centralize public comments. So that is the email address to forward future public comments. And I'm going to move us on to item 4, which is disposition of minutes. We do have a draft set of minutes from our June 14, 2023 meeting. It is found on page 5 of your packets. And do I have any questions or comments on the minutes from APC members? Okay, hearing none, would anyone care to make a motion to approve our minutes?
Eric Young, move to approve.
Thank you, Eric.
Sue Chandler, I second that.
Thank you, Sue. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any objections or abstentions?
I'm gonna abstain.
Who was that?
Jason Kuznicki.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you for that. Minutes approved. On to item 5, planning matters. So item 5A is discussion and possible recommendation for approval of the proposed amendments to the Code of Ordinances, chapters 2, 30, 37, 50, 60, 65, 66, 67, 82, 84, 90, the rules of procedure, Articles 5, 10, 12, 16, and the fee schedule introduction, multipliers, schedules A through J, mitigation fees, and shore zone mitigation fees in support of permitting process improvements. And information can be found on this item on page 29 of your packet. And I'm going to be passing this to Jen Self to introduce Arlo Stockholm, who is going to present on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John Hester, did you want to tee this up, or would you like me to?
I'll tee it up a little bit.
Okay.
Just for the APC members, I personally have been trying to work on process improvements in the 10 or 12 years I've been here. And we always, our caseloads keep going up and we've never been able to free up the staff to do this. So we finally put out an RFP. For those of you who've been around a while, you know, Arlo Stockholm was on staff, the planning manager at the time, who led the regional plan update in 2012. He's been a CD director in larger organizations. He also does contract permit reviews for us. So he responded to the RFP, and frankly, we couldn't find anybody more qualified who knew other organizations' practices as well as TRPAs and knew what the intent of the regional plan was. So Arlo got the RFP for this project and has been working on it and doing a stellar job with our staff. Wendy Jepson, Permitting and Compliance Department Director, Jen Self, this is basically her baby, and Ali Borowski, who has been a part of the team as well, working on customer service. And if I say anything more, I'll probably steal your introduction, Jen, so I'll stop there.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Jen Self, for the record, principal planner with the Permitting and Compliance Department. I don't have too much of an introduction today, other than to say that we are very appreciative and grateful to have Arlo on board with us. He's really been the project lead for this, identifying recommendations that are being brought forward today. Today's presentation is to go over that amendment package in detail, and then we are going to ask for a few motions from you all at APC to recommend approval to the governing board. And we're scheduled to go to the governing board later this month on September 27th. And at that hearing, that'll be the official approval and adoption of these amendments. The amendment package and those recommendations, Arlo has presented those to our governing board, received endorsement from the governing board. And this is really the amendment package where the rubber hits the road. This is how we implement it, how we get it rolled out, and things like that. So really looking forward to the discussion today and hearing from all of you. And so I'll turn that over to Arlo.
Thank you, everyone. Very happy to be here. Good to see some of you on the screen. You're in tiny little boxes, but I can see you anyway. I'd like to go through a little bit of a presentation, probably about 20 minutes of where we've been through this process. It's been about 18 months, and the amendment package proposed to move forward that's in front of you today. And then we can open it up to questions, suggestions, whatever we need to do. So I'm not sure who is running the slideshow, but if you could click that along. Thank you, Tracy. What are we trying to do? We've really been trying to stay focused on the purpose of this project, which is focused on process, the permitting process, and making improvements to that permitting process. We're trying to stay away from kind of the real regulatory focus, which is a lot of your work, and see how we can make the system work better. And what that's going to do is help accelerate environmental redevelopment and threshold attainment. There's a lot of good environmental things coming out of redevelopment, but the process remains, somewhat challenging and lengthy, and at times more difficult than we think it needs to be. So we've identified a whole suite of little things to make the process work a little better. There's no one magic fix of, hey, we're just going to fix this and everything's going to go smoothly. It's kind of 50 little things cause challenges and bumps in the road. So we're trying to take those on. I really want to just take a moment to thank everyone here, everyone online who's contributed to this project. We've received a whole bunch of input from diverse stakeholders. The project management team's been great. There's been a lot of kind of back of house work going on here to integrate these changes into the permitting system, the Acela software, everything else. I probably won't name everyone because I'll forget someone, but really a lot of great support for this. And then the stakeholders who shared their ideas, we really started with some discussions with project applicants who see, the nitty gritty details of TRPA permitting. So starting out, I had a bunch of discussions with staff, a bunch of discussions with applicants, and then we kind of broadened it out once we had an idea of where those kind of core members were coming from, bringing in local agency staffs and suggestions from them. The league has been great. We've been vetting all of these ideas through the League to Save Lake Tahoe and refining the proposals to address any concerns they may have from an environmental perspective. So I think the package in front of you is fairly refined. Tracy, if you could click to the next slide. We've kind of worked with this participatory process. I hope some of you can see this better than I can. But we've been incrementally getting more detailed with these ideas with a lot of public participation. We started almost 18 months ago doing a bunch of stakeholder interviews and kind of getting preliminary ideas on the table. Then we refined that and had lists of priority topics and ultimately an action plan that we brought forward about a year ago to the governing board and received unanimous endorsement to move forward. And that kind of identified the key topics that we were to address. We moved forward getting to that next level of detail, which we called an implementation report, which really spelled out in pretty good detail what's in front of you today, but not with the level of detail you need for code amendments and rule of procedure amendments. That also went to the governing board and received endorsement. Some of you participated in stakeholder meetings during those steps in the process. And then essentially we did another round of refinement, getting it to the level of detail that's in front of you now, a series of meetings. We were at the Regional Plan Implementation Committee last month, presenting this package, and they unanimously endorsed moving forward with it. So we're here at the APC, and then the final step will be governing board later this month. We do have some additional work planned I'll touch on in the presentation, but this is really the biggest bundle of the improvements that we're trying to implement. Next slide, please. So the priority topics, I mentioned the action plan, and we're really trying to stay focused on what are the fundamental challenges. Front and center was a desire to be more efficient, consistent, and predictable. There was quite a bit of variation reported in how different staff members handle similar situations, and we're trying to really, focus on efficiency and consistency and just quality application review processes. The next biggie involved little applications. I was a little surprised it went in this direction initially, but it makes sense. A lot of our initial interviews basically said, big projects are always going to be hard at Tahoe. You have the compact, you have the regional plan, but all these little routine things people thought could move a lot quicker and easier. So we really have a lot of focus here on minor applications, things that rarely elevate themselves to the APC or the board, but day in and day out, staff is spending a lot of time dealing with. Third priority involves code standards and clarifying what the rules really are. There's a long history at TRPA of, the ordinances are not always easily measurable. There's a lot of environmental performance standards built into the ordinances, which have required staff to make interpretations. How does this work when it comes to an 8 square foot improvement? Coverage doesn't have measurable terms. So we've tried to clarify what those rules are consistent with prior practice. I suspect we're going to have some additional amendments in the future, but code clarifications, especially in the coverage chapters, are really central here. Fourth priority is public communication and customer service and continuing and improving those things. Staff development and training. I think we can enhance staff training and be able to assign some of the projects that are going to senior principal planners now should be manageable for assistant and associate level planners with some of these administrative improvements that we're recommending be approved. And then finally, funding. I'll touch on that, but fundamentally, the application fees were not covering the cost of reviews, and they haven't for quite some time. And that's a challenge we're trying to take on primarily through efficiencies, but there are some fee adjustments recommended. I assume everyone's hearing me okay. Please jump in if not. I know we have technology changes here today. Next slide, Tracy, please. So the implementation report, again, got to more detail. I'm going to touch on each of these topics, so I'll slip through this slide. Probably just to emphasize that the next step of the process, we're really going to focus on application, the quality of applications, and the process used for application reviews. So that'll be coming. Next slide, please. So I think we're getting here to kind of the nuts and the bolts. Three of the priorities I mentioned are really being addressed primarily through TRPA administrative improvements, not ordinances or new things to adopt, but basically the really boring stuff of how people do their business day in and day out here. So we're working on a lot of those tools. I'll touch on them also for public communication and staff development. Those are really internal matters. We don't really have documents in front of you to approve. I'd like to go over what we're working on. Next slide. Front and center on those administrative improvements is a comprehensive procedure manual for TRPA permitting. It's grown to about 80 pages and it'll go out for some refinement. We'll be using this for our training. But what we're really trying to do there is put in writing what the planners do here when it comes to project review. And that'll be a training tool for new planners. It's a tool for management to ensure consistency. And it's also a place to go when, process variations or interpretations or kind of thorny issues are addressed. They can get written down in this document, so then they'll be consistently implemented moving forward. There are a bunch of additional kind of documents and management tools that go along with the procedure manual. Moving to the use of shared forms and templates and less kind of individual variation between the reviewing planners. Everyone will be using the same condition master template. Everyone will be using the same permit templates. We're expanding kind of staff teams and almost what you describe as the middle management within the department. There are over 20 planners here now doing project review, and that's just too many to directly report to Wendy. So there's a layer of supervisors, Allie, Wendy, Tiffany, or I'm sorry, Wendy Jen, I already said Wendy, that are kind of doing the immediate supervision, and that's to make the system as responsive as it can. We have some additional customer service tools online and here at the office. And again, we're looking at expanding that with our next phase. Next up, please. Okay, so this is what's in front of you. Moving to priority number 2, simplifying procedures for minor applications. 5 pretty substantive procedural changes. I do want to emphasize, and what the errata sheet deals with is that some of these internal procedures, we wrote these to be TRPA procedures, minor applications. I understand that there are some MOUs and it could be interpreted to de facto apply to the local governments, but that wasn't the intent at all. Local agencies can manage, the details of your processing. So the errata sheet makes that clear that things like minor applications, which is a biggie here at the office, that's a TRPA process. The local agencies are not obligated to follow those same timelines. So minor applications are a biggie, bundled applications, and I'll speak to each of these. Improving procedures for qualified exempt activities, historic resource protection procedures, and an additional delegation of decisions to staff level as opposed to hearing officer or governing board. Tracy, click please. So minor applications might be one of the more notable process changes for the public. Right now, every type of application basically goes into the same process and the same timeline. It's 30-day completeness review, 120 days to issue a permit. We really tried to carve out those applications that are easy and shouldn't need to take that amount of time And we have a list of eligibility, kind of all the approvals that don't require special findings or really detailed analysis. It's just, these clearly conform. Let's make it quicker. Let's make it easier. So that's what we're doing with minor applications. It'll go to a 15-day completeness review instead of 30, and a 40-day review timeline instead of 120. So you're cutting the review timeline for minor improvements, almost by 2/3 with this timeline change. There's a lot of back of house improvements that need to happen within a cella. These are going to be split apart upon submittal and basically go to a separate review team so they don't get hung up with major project reviews. And we're trying to simplify the application forms and the analysis as much as we can. For example, summary approval of findings. So applicants won't have to do a findings analysis with a minor application. I think we can move on to the next one. This will apply to a lot of home improvements, transfers, lot line adjustments. It's not going to extend all the way to new development or major projects. Here's again the list: ADUs, a series of minor applications, some additional grading. Next slide, please. Next up is bundling of applications. There's a lot of sequential approvals necessary at TRPA, starting with your site assessment or other determination. You may need to do a lot line adjustment, you may need to transfer some development. This change allows applicants to request the bundling of those applications. You're still going to need to do site assessments and projects in sequence, but you would be able to bundle. So you have a minor lot line adjustment that goes along with the project. You could request bundling, so those are handled either by the same person or a coordinated manner and processed concurrently. Do that with coverage transfers, lot line adjustment, historic, just trying to speed up the easy sequential procedures. Next up. Qualified exempt has been a challenge. These are supposed to be exempt with a property owner declaration, and kind of a de facto review process kind of evolved over the years, but there was no fee structure to support that. So over time, a lot of staff time was spent reviewing things that are supposed to be exempt and not collecting fees for doing it. When we went into these are really minor things. They're not adding coverage. Probably the biggest thing is a home modification that doesn't add coverage. So we're trying to go back with the qualified exempt process to what the code says to do. This is going to be a property owner declaration. Here's are the rules. I certify that I fit within these rules, and staff's not going to do a stamp of approval. The alternative was kind of to have it be a project review, but there would be a need to raise fees. And we just really want staff to be focusing on environmentally significant things, not these minor property improvements that really have no significant impact on the environment. We changed some of the items. There are some approvals or some submittals are moving from qualified exempt to exempt. But those are pretty minor. We still kept exempt for items that require BMP certificates or items that require coverage mitigation fees or things like that, because that's caught during QE. But it should be quicker and easier and not so intensive of a process. Next up, kind of the same approach for historic resource protection. I don't think I presented this well at the RPIC, and I ended up having a pretty long discussion. So I'm going to try to answer some of their questions right now. Where we landed, there was widespread consensus that the process for historic was spending a lot of time on not significant things and kind of should be redirected to historically significant matters. But there was some interest in kind of waiving TRPA reviews for certain projects, maybe extending the timeline beyond 50 years. But kind of where we landed is we're keeping the same basic protections. If a home is over 50 years and it's proposed to modify, it's still going to get a historic resource screening, but it's going to be a much more efficient process. We also maintain the same criteria for eligibility and all of that. So those simplified procedures, one, historic's a minor application. Two, it can be bundled and processed concurrently. Three, if there is a potentially significant historic resource there, those are handled in a pretty routine manner. Those would no longer need to go to the hearings officer. It would be staff approvable. The same type of conditions would be applied. These are for eligible resources, not any listed or designated resources. And then the states really wanted to get out of this kind of routine screening of non-designated structures. So the state SHPO involvement in routine screening of historic resource at their request has been moved away. They're going to focus on historic significant things, and staff will handle the routine screenings. There is interest in doing additional work that may involve kind of revisiting TRPA's historic resource list and looking at historic resources from a policy perspective, focusing on significant areas or significant resources. But in terms of just the routine day-to-day historic resource determinations, still going to happen, but should be a lot quicker and easier. Next up. Delegation of additional decisions to staff. The biggest are the shore zone applications, although there are a few generally applicable. I mentioned historic resources. There are some public projects that could be approved by staff. Utility replacement can extend into the SEZs at a staff level. Some additional coverage allowed for EIP projects. Probably one of the bigger ones, I think it was South Lake Tahoe was really emphasizing. We are proposing deleting the separate approval thresholds for awarding bonus units. And bonus units would just be awarded as a routine matter with qualifying projects when those were approved. So that should streamline some affordable housing and other types of project approvals. The more significant changes are in the shore zone. A lot of the shore zone ordinances have been in place now for about 5 years, and they're working pretty well. There's pretty clear standards of what qualifies and what doesn't. So a whole suite of routine shore zone approvals, including piers and buoys, are proposed to be handled at a staff level, but with noticing retained. So neighbors would still get noticed if there's any dispute over a particular pier or whatever improvement, it could be appealed up to the governing board. But for routine pier approvals, those could be handled at the staff level with noticing. It didn't extend to all shore zone improvements, revetments and some of the more potentially significant improvements will still need to go to the governing board. But these shore zone applications, that was a huge piece of that financial mismatch I mentioned earlier. The fees are much lower than the cost of reviews. So this delegation to staff is kind of an alternative to what we think would need to be a pretty significant fee increase if we kept governing board review of these improvements. I think that covers the minor improvement category. Yeah, thanks. Next slide, please, Tracy. So our next procedure are the code clarifications. Really trying to make it make code clear. Code says what happens. If it's not written in code, it doesn't happen. A whole suite of code clarifications, most of which deal with coverage, but not all of them. Next slide, please. I think I have a couple slides just listing them. Coverage is a tough one. The definition you can't measure. I mean, it's a fundamental development limitation, but it doesn't say what qualifies or not. So starting with the definition, we tried to define in measurable terms, what is coverage, what isn't coverage. A whole series, mostly in section 30.4, clarifying existing practices in relation to coverage, mainly dealing with small things or nuanced improvements. There is a little bit of an expansion of what we've been doing in the past. And that's why I have those asterisks on the slide dealing with small utility installations. These coverage exemptions, I think most people are viewing them as pretty successful. They're bringing in a lot of water quality improvements and BMPs, but there was kind of a gap. There were all these improvements, decks, non-permanent structures that could qualify for an exemption. But things like HVAC units or EV chargers or solar panels, utility boxes, those didn't qualify. So we kind of carved out an additional exemption subject to the same aggregate caps. So if people are maxed out on coverage, there would be a path, at least on high capability lands, to put in some of these small utility improvements. And allow that to part of your exempted coverage allowance to be used for those. Clarifying again, pervious coverage, just kind of defining some of the details of what qualifies for deck exemptions, what doesn't. Defensible space, clarifying that as a coverage exemption consistent with practice. Next slide, please. Few more on coverage. Probably one here, I think you're all familiar with the offsite coverage mitigation program, which has been in place for over 20 years. That was written as an administrative interpretation. It never got written into code. So we're writing into code consistent with longstanding practice. Clarifying a couple provisions on how height is measured. Scenic quality, there's been reflectivity and glare, quite a bit of variation on how staff handles like sun shining against a window down onto Lake Tahoe. So we've tried to kind of create a standard process. There's still some judgment involved. So there'll be greater consistency on when people have to do low reflectivity windows, for example, outside the shore zone. And then a couple of shore zone really clarifications of, you know, what's a shore zone boulder relocation compared to dredging, making a clear distinction. And one little inconsistency to clean up. Next slide, please. I think that was, oh yeah, chapter 90 definitions. We have a section on rounding. I mentioned the land coverage definition. A notable thing here, utility lids, really a lot of variation. There's a standard here that a utility lid necessary, less than 6 square feet is not coverage. I'm trying to create a standard kind of threshold there and some definitions. Next slide. A couple kind of procedural ordinances that we think are going to save a lot of time that really wasn't going to good use, both for TRPA staff and local agency staffs. One is the below the IPES line drawing is redundant with the incentive allocation pool. So the idea here is there will be no below the IPES line drawing unless the supply of allocations is gone. That'll save, you know, a few weeks a year of staff time that was just no value added. Probably a bigger one is reducing the single family audit requirement from 10% to 5%. A big state time savings for TRPA staff, probably a quarter of a FTE. And should also save a lot of staff time for local government staff. You know, 10% is an incredibly high audit rate. 5% everyone feels is plenty sufficient to catch issues that come through. And then some code reference document we have so the links, reference documents, and code are convenient and accessible. Next up, I know this is a bunch of long, boring stuff. Thanks for hanging in here. You know, I think it matters to the people who do this day. And funding. Funding's a biggie. I mentioned earlier, we have a mismatch. The permitting department here at TRPA has been running a fiscal deficit for quite a few years, and that's not sustainable. We really focused on getting rid of wasted time and being more efficient as the primary strategy instead of just coming forward and saying, hey, we need a 30% fee increase. We're really looking at opportunities to do the work more efficiently. That being said, there are some targeted fee increases and decreases recommending. And we are establishing, I think it's pretty close to ready, a more detailed fiscal monitoring system to monitor the revenues coming in for the permitting program and the expenses and use that information to inform future fee changes. May go up, may go down, I'm not sure. So next slide or two, I think I have the specific fee changes. So generally outside the shore zone, that new staff level review process with noticing, we have a 1.25 fee multiplier, which will actually be a decrease compared to the multipliers for public hearings. We're recommending removing the fee multiplier in special planning areas. This is kind of penalizing projects in town centers and other area plan areas where they have to charge more. Tourist fees, bumping them modestly to match multifamily, reduction for daycare. QE, we're gonna keep it low, but apply that nominal fee to all submittals, and then just a couple nominal fees for routine things that don't have a fee associated with them. So pretty modest. I don't think there's gonna be a major, increase or decrease in aggregate outside the shore zone. But next slide, please. The shore zone changes should generate some changes. When shore zone ordinances were approved, the fees were not revisited. So these fees that are in place today are very, very old. And they just don't cover the cost of reviews on some of them. Shoreland scenic has gotten very complex, especially with the large lakefront homes. The fee just didn't cover it. We're recommending a 2-tier fee, $1,000 for easy ones, $2,000 for hard ones. Mooring lottery eligibility, moving that up to $350, estimate of cost recovery. New buoys, similar things, they just weren't covering the cost of reviews. Pier expansions was probably the biggest mismatch. Pier expansions were treated the same as a minor pier modification, but the review process is basically the same as a new pier. So those are seeing the biggest fee increases of anyone. So the table at the bottom kind of shows when you put that all together for, representative projects in the shore zone, what the total fees are today and what they would look like after this. You can see a few of them bump up 10 or 15%. Some of them go down 10 or 15%. And the pier expansion is the one with the greatest increase. Next slide. I think I'm almost done. Thanks for bearing with me. So we were at RPIC 3 weeks ago. That went pretty well. They made a few minor revisions and unanimously recommended approval. We're here before you, looking forward to hearing your thoughts and getting a recommendation, and then moving forward to governing board in 2 weeks. Assuming governing board approves or adopts a package, there'd be a 60-day period before that goes into effect, during which we'll do training, education, finish up some of the back of house work necessary to implement this, and then we'll be off and running near the end of November. And again, working on some additional process improvements through March of next year. Next slide. There we have it. I'm all done. Thanks for bearing with me. I hope that was helpful, and turn it back to the commission.
Great. Thank you, Arlo. Really appreciate that. A lot of detail. I, for one, commend TRPA and their desire to take this on and make these process adjustments. I think, this is good government. We should all be looking at things like this. Obviously, I've actually shared this information internally with my agency, just trying to get the ball rolling on potential process improvements we can make. And, this is the right way to do things. So I commend you. We're looking for efficiencies, and we need things like this. So broad statement from me, but why don't I go over to APC members for any questions, comments on what we just heard. Why don't we go to the room first? I know we have Mr. Kuchnicki, Mr. Hitchcock, Mr. Alling. Anything from you three?
Yeah, this is John. The city definitely applauds TRPA staff and Iowa for taking on this daunting task. Definitely to help streamline the permitting process. And for incorporating some of the suggestions the city provided, in particular the EV charging station exemption, and then removing that requirement for the extra review for bonus units for affordable housing. I think that's going to be very helpful. I do have one clarified question. On the section for coverage for facilities for public safety and access for the disabled, I'm assuming the transfer coverage is going to be pursuant to the transfer provisions of the code. So if you're doing an ADA facility for commercial, it has to be hard coverage and can't use potential coverage.
Yes, that doesn't adjust
Yeah, it doesn't just.
what
transfer.
has to be
Okay,
transferred.
Yeah.
We
That's
tried
fine.
that, you touched on an important section, that was one of the most difficult ones to work on the drafting.
Mhm.
It's kind of like the final relief valve if you're, have no coverage and there's a public safety issue. So we tried to kind of, write it up, how this has been implemented over the years. And make it clear that, yes, this is kind of a relief valve.
Okay. No, thanks. That's all I have.
Thanks, Hitch. Mr. Steven, I understand you're in the room as well. Sorry to leave you out.
No worries. Sorry, I was late.
All good. Anything else for members in the room?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Garth. Quick question. You touched briefly on the historic resources, and basically you stated that the states wish to not be involved with some of that review. So the SHPO now, are you gonna have a programmatic agreement with SHPO to allow you to make some of these determinations? How's that working?
What they're gonna stay involved in, everything they're involved with everywhere else. What they want to get out of is TRPA just screens every old structure before approving anything, non-designated. Spends a lot of time screening just everyday little old cabins. That's the work they want to get out of. They think they have more important, and I think they do have more important historical matters. And really, we're trying to shift the focus. The later phase of this project is to go back to the TRPA, historic resource list. That list hasn't been updated since 1989. We think time would be much better spent kind of doing what you're suggesting, looking programmatically at areas or significant historical resources and spending less time on, is every old cabin historical?
Sure.
So Jen's really our staff expert. She can go into more detail, but that was the idea, is keep everyone focused on the historically significant things and spend less time on the routine mind numbing stuff that just happens every day.
Yeah, so the Historic Preservation Office is basically granting you guys that ability to make those determinations on these smaller.
Not necessarily. So, when our code was written, actually going back to the 1987 regional plan, and the language about historic resource protection, we were actually saying, SHPO, you have authority to give us guidance and advice. And so we were placing that authority on them, which is very uncommon for a local municipality or a local agency to do that. We've worked with SHPO over a number of years, both California and Nevada. It's, over the years that conversation has evolved, and essentially in this work, when we're looking at how we streamline things, SHPO is saying, we actually don't have that legal authority to do the authority that you've given us. So we'd like to give that back to you.
Sure.
That's really your responsibility,
Okay.
and your responsibility to work with all the local jurisdictions to make those determinations, to come up with the mitigation requirements that's appropriate. They're there if we ever need to consult them, in an advisory capacity, but they're saying we really can't do this authority that you've granted us.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
You don't often see a code that says, hey, you other agency,
Right.
do this,
Right.
but that's what we have.
Yeah, and then I had one other minor question. The minor applications that you're now turning into QEs, or maybe if you can go back to that slide, I can't remember. But what change of the applications that are coming in, what percentage of the applications are now going to be in this new category?
Minor. So I want to be clear on the terminology. Qualified exempt is a category of exempt. It's not it's below the threshold for a project requiring TRPA review. So you take the project, if you're above that threshold for QE, I don't know, what do you think, Ally? Maybe a third, maybe something like that. It's going to be a significant number,
So, yeah,
maybe
that's
even
quite-
half of them.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of routine applications, and oftentimes they move through the process pretty quickly. But sometimes they don't. They get stuck and there's no real flag, maybe someone's doing a controversial project and there's a little deck addition. that
So a
kind of
third
gets
to a half, I
done.
mean, that's a significant amount. That's a huge.
We think it's gonna be, at least one full-time planner reviewing them, probably more.
Okay, great, thank you.
I had a question. presentation, very thorough, as well as the packet, so my compliments to TRPA and consulting team. Everybody should be commended for trying to improve process, and along those lines, I was just wondering if you could speak to how these improvements will be assessed and moving forward, what is the process for, continuing to assess and improve upon these processes?
It's a great question, and it's an important management tool to not just do a one-time fix and say, hey, now we're done, we're good to go. We're planning to assess and refine. I'm on board for the next 6 months to kind of help with this initial cut. And we expect in about 6 months' time, we're gonna probably have some more code clarifications. We may have some adjustments. The procedure manual is gonna be a living document that's gonna be updated on a routine manner. And I think John has really emphasized, kind of continual improvement and coming forward. I think you can expect maybe once a year to see code interpretations coming forward. You may see some fee adjustments once we monitor how these adjustments are working and how the budget's going, coming forward with those adjustments. We really see this procedure manual as a key tool to document ongoing improvements and turn them into standard operating procedure. So it's hard to say, is this going to work great? Is it going to totally collapse? There are a couple efforts coming behind that are related to this. Karen Fink is leading up efforts on housing. We kind of got into it a little bit with bonus units, but I think some of those housing amendments are going to build upon this with some policy changes and also climate amendments. Jacob Stopp is working on those. I know Tesla wanted us to get much more aggressive, exempting everything related to EVs, but we kind of stopped short of that. But Jacob's looking at kind of more policy-oriented climate adjustments. So it all works together, and I certainly hope, John, you can add if you want.
You covered almost everything. The only thing I would add, Jason, that might help is we are building performance measures around the new procedures that will go into the work plans for the individuals in the agency, and tracking mechanisms, so we can come back and say, we are meeting this performance measure, or we are not, or here's Arlo gave an example of we have to do a bunch of code interpretations on something. We probably need to just amend the code, that kind of stuff. But we're big on continuous improvement. Hope that helped answer.
Yeah, that's great.
And if I could add to that too, so there's a couple different performance measures in place that this work will both inform, and then hopefully we'll see, a change to those trends over time. There's a number of existing performance measures in our operations work plans for our entire department. That's very specific to what we're permitting and how fast and the calls received and our response to the customers to provide excellent customer service. That's our goal. And so we have those existing performance measures in the operations work plan. And then as John said, we're developing more. Okay, what is other metrics and measurable things that we can capture to help us better manage workloads and customer service and things like that? So it's really twofold. So we can look at backwards trends and forward trends as well.
Excellent.
This was interesting for me because it kind of was that screening for, in particular, the coverage exemptions that were adopted about a decade ago. Those I think those took off, and I think they've been more successful, at least than I anticipated. And we kind of went back and did a refinement. Hey, there's a couple of gaps in it. There's a lot of questions have emerged over this. So this process kind of a refinement of those amendments that were done a decade ago. And we may very well have changes to minor applications or whatever, depending on how that goes.
I'm sure we'll have changes. Unless we're not doing our job.
Right. Yeah, like you said, there's a lot of, 50, 100 little things.
Yeah, I'm sure you deal with the same thing in your position. We could fix this a little bit and make it better, and you find something else.
And there may be some where we kind of dipped our toes in some changes and you want to go a little more aggressive once you see how it goes.
Right. I also had a question about I guess, related to the errata and, the approval process for this. Does that, with the errata coming out this morning, does that influence the ability to move this forward at all, or?
It does not. I don't know if John Marshall's on the line, if he wants to speak to that. But what we'll do with that errata, again, the errata that came out this morning was really to clarify the bulk of this amendment package is really geared towards operations at TRPA. And we have a number of MOU partners that are doing permitting delegated by TRPA on our behalf. And so with changes in procedural updates, like for a minor, you have to do a 15-day completeness review, you have to take action within 40 days. We wanted to clarify that was really intended for TRPA, and that's not an obligation that we're placing onto our MOU partners. So to answer your question, you can still take action on this. We'll likely amend the motion just to make sure the motion includes that you're also incorporating the errata into that. But you can still take action today.
These were sections that were already being amended and properly noticed, so it's just some wording adjustments.
Thanks for the clarification. I got it right before I hopped in the car, so obviously wasn't able to review it. So thanks for explaining it.
There were also some cross references cleaned up in that errata sheet.
Thanks. That was good discussion. Can I just, while we're on that topic, can you talk about any other MOU partner, changes with the delegations of authority? Are you going to be doing training for us once this is adopted? Is there anything further there to let us know about?
Yeah, let me try. On training, yes. We're planning a 2-month period kicking off after the governing board meeting later this month to make sure everyone's trained up. Really tried to make the changes that were applicable to get delegated permitting, focused on making it easier and more clear. So I don't think we have any new or additional obligations for the local agencies. But obviously the clarified ordinances and other matters, are gonna, be your processes will be subject to those as well. So I think it's mainly the code clarifications that are really gonna need, good training and making sure everyone's, clear on what the rules are and what interpretations have been made. The rest of it, I'm not sure is gonna have too much of an impact on the MOU partner work.
Okay.
The procedures, the shore zone procedures that are delegated to staff, those aren't delegated to local agencies already, so those won't affect you.
Yep. Good. Okay. Thank you. Good discussion there. I'm assuming we're good in the room for now, so let's go online. Fellow Zoom participants, either raise your hand or go ahead and unmute and go for it. All right, let's go with Miss Simon first. I guess I'll go hands. We'll do it right.
Oh, okay. Thank you. A couple of things. One is the shore zone and the new piers. It looks, when you kind of look at the lake, it looks like there's been a proliferation of new piers, and if you can let me know how that's being monitored. And my second question is about coverage and what is minor. I think it's a very confusing concept for things like bear boxes, deck exemptions, dumpsters, that sort of thing. So is that clear? If you don't have coverage and you want to put a cement pad with a bear box or something like that, how do you accomplish that?
Well, the specific example, I'm not sure you would be able to put a concrete pad if you're out of coverage. You'd probably have to do the bear box elevated. But more generally, what we tried to do in that whole section, you're right on point that it's confusing. And there have been a whole series of kind of rules of thumb and guidance that staff has developed to, how do you handle it? Because it's confusing for staff as well. we tried to put all that in writing. So at least someone could look and see, okay, here is the standard for a bear box. It has to be elevated 6 inches off and it doesn't count as coverage. How big of a utility lid is coverage or not? We put a number, it's 6 square feet. Boulders. So we tried to address some of the confusion, not by deleting requirements, but by explaining what the requirements are.
Just to
I hope-
follow up, are there any alternatives then? Like if you're out of coverage and you can't do this, what can you do?
That's where it comes to that safety valve that John Hitchcock mentioned. I think it's 30.4.2. If you're maxed out on coverage and there's an improvement that's a public safety issue, like, for example, you need an ADA walkway, or you don't have any off-street parking and the local agency needs to plow the street, that type of stuff, that's your relief valve. You have to acquire coverage and transfer it in. But if it's just for kind of I would like to do a bigger family room and I'm out of coverage, that's where the hard development caps of TRPA come into play. There is a hard cap on coverage at the end of the day. So sometimes adding improvements requires removing other improvements.
Okay.
Does that help? Am I getting at the question?
Yes, I think so. And then also about the new peers.
Yeah.
in the shore zone.
I think I'd like Tiffany Good, who's in the room here and runs that program, to address that.
Thanks, Arlo. Hi, everybody. My name is Tiffany Good. I'm a principal planner with the Permitting and Compliance Department. My primary responsibility, one of my big responsibilities is implementing the shoreline plan. So the shoreline, I'm just going to keep this very high level, but the shoreline plan, when it was adopted in 2018, approved a certain number of new piers. That number happens to be 128, and we are allocating those and reviewing those on a slow as you go approach. So every 2 years, we have a pier lottery, and we allocate 12 new pier allocations every 2 years. And then those property owners who receive the allocations make application to us. So at that point, we're in the review process for these new piers. We just completed our 3rd round of the peer allocation process. So we have allocated 36 new piers. I think we've permitted, let's see, I have the numbers here. We've permitted about 2/3 of those throughout the various jurisdictions on the lake. And so they're being built and they're being reviewed, approved, and built kind of on a slow as you go approach, but there are new piers being built. And that same thing goes for buoys as well. We have a mooring lottery that we do every year. So we allocate a certain number of new buoys every year. So this is probably kind of a reminder for a lot of you, but some of you, you might be hearing this for the first time. So I hope that answers your question. If there's anything else, let me know.
I think so.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Good, for jumping in there. All right, Ms. Jacobson, on to you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferry. I had a couple questions that actually already got answered. They were about sort of local government delegation and a training program for local government staff. So I appreciate the answers on those items. I too want to commend TRPA for bringing this forward. The county's done a lot of similar things in terms of, looking for areas of change where we can increase efficiency and customer service. So really appreciate the effort here. And then also just, I will say it also helps our staff, right? And working with TRPA on permitting in the basin. So it helps with customer service, but I think it also helps all the clarity around the code definitely helps with our staff to do that permitting. So thank you for that. I would just say that, one of the things we're focusing on is ongoing monitoring and looking for areas of change. So the adaptive management piece of this, I think, is important. Sounds like you're doing that as well. So in general, just say, very supportive of what's being brought forward and appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. Mr. Drake?
Thanks. Good presentation, Marlo. And as Brendan said, this is good government. I love seeing it. Just not just jumping to fee increases without looking at efficiency first. So that's a really positive thing. I commend specifically the effort to find ways to delegate more decision-making responsibility to staff level and minimize the number of things coming to governing board. I think that's also a great direction. One suggestion I have, maybe a question actually, is there any intention to do outreach to, in particular, the small business community about some of these changes? I think they're really positive changes. Some will make a big difference to certain businesses. Others will make a difference to other businesses. But I know that being a small business owner myself, if I weren't on this committee, I wouldn't have a whole lot of time to keep up with TRPA code changes. And sometimes by doing some outreach to the business community, you can help them find wins that can really move the needle. So that's a suggestion and maybe a question if there's any. Maybe we can free up some planner time through some efficiency improvements and get out in the communities a bit more, say business associations, chambers. I know that development consultants and whatnot were involved in this process, and they have their finger on the pulse of what some of the sticky points are. But I'm talking about smaller businesses that probably aren't going to be hiring a consultant to interpret code, things like that.
I agree fully that is time well spent. We've been trying to get out and get input from the business community, not just the consultants. They've been very helpful, but a broader group. So we do plan some outreach. We have a fairly extensive email list. We'll be sending out some invites. So if anyone's watching along and wants to get notice of those educational opportunities, informational presentations, shoot us an email, let me know, and we can add you to that list. But yeah, we're going to be doing training. I think Randy's going to help coordinate the local agency and MOU partner training. We'll do some more sessions with the applicants / business community, broadly speaking, and happy to go to any specific spots if there are any suggestions.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, this is Jen Self. A couple times a year, we do realtor talks where we go out to different realtor groups. They're very well attended, and it's formed a really good relationships. A lot of times when folks are thinking about a change or buying a property, the realtor is their source of information. And a lot of times a realtor is like the first point of contact that you have with local agencies in the basin. And so that ongoing relationship to keep them informed of what's coming down the pipeline at TRPA or certain regulations or what you can do on your property has been really helpful and really effective. I think you bring up a great point to maybe go a step further and see what are other ways we can include the local businesses and property owners, just to let them, be aware of, hey, here's what you can do on your property. Again, to get the good redevelopment, environmentally beneficial redevelopment on the ground. So we can definitely, and think about ways to go beyond what we're doing today.
Good to hear that. I think the real estate community is a great place to start, especially when it comes to residential homes. And maybe I'm thinking of a lot of businesses like retail stores, restaurants, bars, tourism, recreation focused businesses that maybe don't understand what they're allowed to do, not allowed to do. In fact, going beyond just communicating these code changes might be nice to have some opportunities for business owners to have a planner they can just ask questions in general without having to submit an application and kind of get super formal about it. Just kind of, hey, how could I navigate this? This would be meaningful for my business or for this community. So anyway, thank you.
Hey, Kevin, this is John Hester. I know you have some business associations that you work with on the North Shore, and you have a specific group you'd like us to come meet with. We'd be happy to do that.
Cool. I'll circle back with you, John. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Kevin. Good suggestion. Don't see any more hands. Any final thoughts from members on Zoom? Ms. Stoller.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Chair. I had two questions, and one of them was about consultant engagement. So I'm glad to hear that that was part of it. And my second question is related to the shore zone fee changes. I was just curious to know if TRPA has received any feedback so far on those and what that might look like.
Fees. No one jumps up and says, hey, raise my fee. But at the same time, the priority from the applicants has been quality, efficient processing. If an application costs 10 or 15% more, but they've moved through quickly, smoothly, that was the top priority. So while no one really loves, hey, this fee is going to go up a little bit, I haven't heard any significant, no one's jumped in and said I object. It does make sense. People like, I know staff and the League to Save Lake Tahoe, there's strong support there where there really needs to be an adequate budget to do a good job. If TRPA is so strained that they can't handle enough planners and can't hire enough planners, permits start stacking up, that gets really impacted. So the most input we've had is, yeah, if you really need to do a few fees, okay, but make sure your work is good.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks, Hillary. Ms. Chandler.
Yes, just a statement. I'd like to compliment Arlo and the people of the TRPA for putting this together. I think residents will appreciate any and all efforts to streamline procedures for permitting. And I also appreciate the fact that you're making special arrangements for EV and perhaps the installation of generators, et cetera. So thank you. This is a good step in the right direction.
Thanks, Susan. Yep. Okay. Good input from APC. I'm going to move us now over to some public comment on this item. So to participate in the meeting, again, go to trpa.gov. In the calendar, click on APC meeting, September 13, 2023. There you'll find a link to our webinar. If any member of the public wishes to address the Advisory Planning Commission at this time on this item, which is 5A, please raise your hand now by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your telephone, and you'll be called upon and unmuted by a TRPA staff member.
Mr. Chair, there is no public in the room. And there are no hands raised online to comment.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine. Final thoughts from APC members before I ask for a motion on this item? Okay, we have, I believe, three motions to make. Would anyone care to make the first motion, and good luck getting all of that right?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Crystal.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the required findings in attachment D. Including a finding of no significant effect for the adoption of the amendments to the Code of Ordinances, chapters 2, 30, 37, 50, 60, 65, 66, 67, 82, 84, and 90. Rules of procedure, articles 5, 10, and 12, and 16. Design review guidelines, appendix H, and fee schedule to implement recommendations of the permitting improvement project.
Second.
And Mr. Chair, this is Jen Self. Apologies for interrupting, but if we could just add at the end of that motion that it includes the errata that went out this morning, please.
I'll say including the errata that was provided to the commission today.
Thank you, Crystal. And I believe Mr. Hitchcock seconded.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions on the motion? Okay, I believe we need a roll call vote on all three of these individually. Is that right, Mr. Marshall?
That's correct.
Okay, here we go on roll call voting.
Chandler,
Ms. Chandler, that was to you first.
A,
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Kuchniki,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Mr. Drew, may have lost him. Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Ms. Simon,
Yes.
Ms. Stala,
Yes.
Mr. Steven,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay, second motion. Who would like to take that one?
I'll make another motion.
Thanks, Crystal.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval and adoption of ordinance 2023 blank attachment E, amending ordinance 87-9 as amended for the adoption of amendments to the TRPA Code of Ordinances, chapters 2, 30, 37, 50, 60, 65, 66, 67, 82, 84, and 90. Rules of Procedure, Articles 5, 10, 12, and 16, and Design Review Guidelines, Appendix H to the TRPA Governing Board, as well as I think I need to include approval of the errata provided to the commission today.
Thank you, Crystal.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hitch on the second. Okay, Tracy, back to roll call vote on motion 2.
Mr. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Steven,
Yes.
Ms. Stala,
Yes.
Ms. Simon,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Mr. Kuchniki,
Yes.
Ms. Chandler,
yes,
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
and Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Finally, motion 3.
I'm happy to make the final motion as well. Mr.
Thanks,
Ferry.
Crystal.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval and adoption of resolution 2023 blank attachment E, amending the fee schedule to the TRPA governing board. I'm not sure if this one I need to include the errata, but
You do not.
okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Marshall. Thanks, Crystal.
Second.
Thanks, Mr. Hitchcock. Second. Back to you, Tracy. Third roll call vote.
Ms. Chandler,
yes,
Mr. Kuchniki,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Ms. Simon,
Yes.
Ms. Stala,
Yes.
Mr. Steven,
Yes.
Mr. Young,
Yes, and thank you to Crystal for those 3 motions.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the final motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you all for your involvement in this item. Good luck to you, Jen and Arlo, on your final adoption.
Thank you very much.
Have a good rest of the day. And I'm going to move us on to item 6, which are reports. I'm going to pass this over to Mr. Hester for the Executive Director report, including the Tahoe in Brief Governing Board Monthly Report. This is found on a page 171 of your packets and includes upcoming topics.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You usually ask me to talk about recent APC actions and what the board has done with those. We haven't had any since the spring, so nothing new to report there. What is coming up that I want to encourage all of the APC members to attend next month for is significant changes to the code related to deed restricted affordable housing, affordable workforce, achievable. We're going to be talking about density, height, coverage, and parking. So encourage you to attend for that. Our objective is to have you all make whatever, we're going to go to the Regional Plan Implementation Committee in 2 weeks, then come to you all next month and ask for your recommendations. Go back to the Regional Plan Implementation Committee and then back to the Governing Board. They would like to get these amendments passed this calendar year. So we're going to be, it's a big package, but we're going to be moving it through. I thought that was important. And then Planning 102, since we have postponed that so long, I thought I would just take a second to explain to those who might wonder what the heck is Planning 102. We called it 102 because it's not, 101 would just be planning in general, but we called it 102 because as the chair knows and Mr. Marshall knows, we put together a presentation that we shared with some folks on how planning works vis-a-vis TRPA. So if you have, give you a good example. Since we don't have grand subdivisions, subdivision improvements that typically happen in other areas, we have to get those a different way. So those are the kinds of differences between 101 and 102. And so we're going to try to cover those and hope it'll be informative for you all, and maybe we'll get some good input on future things to work on. So that's Planning 102. We'll try to have that next month and not postpone it again, and have a special session or a special one-on-one for those who can't make it. And I think, Mr. Chair, those are all the things I have to say under the director's report.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Hester. Appreciate those updates. Okay, what you've all been waiting for. I'm going to go to Mr. Marshall for the general counsel status report, including the compact open meeting law and conflict of interest requirements.
Well, not to disappoint, but I'm going to need to move the lecture to when we do Planning 102 next month. In part because of, yeah, I know you're all crushed, but in part because we've had a recent, we have a couple pieces of litigation that are ongoing that have required my attention since I've gotten back from vacation, and that was in part the Harash case. If you remember that case, that has to do with the delegation, speaking of delegation, of approval of peers to the hearings officer. And we received an order from the district court asking us to brief all parties to brief the question of whether or not when the compact is subject to interpretation in a piece of litigation, are the two states, California and Nevada, mandatory parties? And if they can't be joined because of sovereign immunity or other jurisdictional reasons, are they necessary and indispensable parties such that the action should be dismissed? And without going into excruciating detail on the concepts of federal jurisdiction and state sovereignty, the key question that's presented here is a compact more like a contract between the two states? And so whenever you have litigation over a contract, the signatories to a contract need to be present and parties in the litigation? Or is it more like federal law, like when the legislature, Congress approves the compact? And if it's just more statutory in nature, then the individual states who initiated the process are not, would not necessarily be required as parties in cases that litigate the how the compact, bi-state compact, would be implemented. So fortunately for you, perhaps, that we're kicking the lecture off to next month. So that's all for now.
We're all disappointed, but we'll accept it reluctantly. And we will hear that in October. So we already know what we're doing in October, it looks like, along with probably some other items. So thank you, John. Appreciate that. APC members, I am now going to go to you for any relevant updates that you'd like to share with the group. We'd love to hear from you. And I'm going to start in the room and go to Mr. Alling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really, I think the only thing at this point in time is upon my reappointment to the APC, Douglas County has required that I come and provide them with an update as to what the APC has been doing in this last year. And knowing one of the major issues that Douglas County has currently is the whole Highway 50 lane reduction project that NDOT has brought forward. There's a lot of people who are extremely upset, and just knowing that that's on the top of their list, I'm going to lean on staff a little bit and ask for some input from them so I can adequately provide a report to Douglas County Board of County Commissioners this fall.
Makes sense. Thanks, Garth. Mr. Hitchcock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to let everyone know, next week and then next month, the city council will be considering adopting an inclusionary housing ordinance that will apply citywide. And then if you haven't visited Sugar Pine Village, affordable housing project is currently under construction. I recommend everyone go by. It's amazing how fast the structure is going. It's a modular construction, 274 units, and we'll have the first phase, second phase built by next summer, and people who start moving in, then we'll be building the third phase later in the year. The city's excited about this. Excited about this one. It's great. That's it.
Thanks, John. Mr. Kuchnicki.
I don't have anything to report. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Steven.
Just wanted to report from the regional chiefs that, evacuation and wildfire preparedness is obviously a hot topic, and, we're working very hard to improve that communication and the programs that we're trying to implement and meet more often and get better messaging out there, and identifying some of the fuel reduction projects that we can do along some of our evacuation routes. So we're definitely ramping up more of those conversations and just realizing that the communication needs to be stronger, as it always needs to be, and just trying to work to improve that. So that's all I had to report.
All right,
Mr. Chair, this is Garth. That brings up a really good point with the fuel reduction. There's a fuel reduction project that Tahoe Douglas Fire Protection District has done together with NV Energy right here on Lower Kingsbury. And it's amazing what has been done, and it might be worth a field visit for the APC to go out and take a look at this project. Just because it's really an amazing project, and it shows how really the firefighters would be able to make a real stand against an advancing wildfire and protecting our community. And I think it's a really good project, and that might be something that's worth our time.
Yeah, good suggestion. I've heard of that project. I can talk to Mr. Hester about that. We'll see if we can get that into our schedule.
Great. We're actually trying to identify more of those projects exactly like that. Great. From around the basin.
Yeah.
To tie them all together.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, I will ask Michelle Glickert to get with you on US 50, Garth.
Okay.
And just for the commission's information, working with the Tahoe Fuel and Fires team and others, we've applied for, don't ask me what PROTECT stands for, but we've applied for a PROTECT grant. And some part of that will be fuels reduction resilience. It's called a resiliency infrastructure plan. I think it's reducing, you don't know either.
No.
I think it's thinning along the evacuation routes. So just FYI, we'll let you know more if we get that. What's going on. Great.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, online, Miss Chandler.
Okay, just an update on the controlled methods test in Tahoe Keys. Year 2 also seems to be a success. We're in the process of compiling data where we've used all methods except herbicides to try to control our invasive species. And the Tahoe Keys Property Owners Association is in the process of voting on the funding for year 3. So that's an update on that. Thank you.
Good, thanks, Susan. Mr. Drake.
No updates, just wanted to say a public thank you to everyone who attended the walking tour of Kings Beach after the governing board meeting last week. Thank you, John Hester, for the work you did to prioritize that and help coordinate. Thanks to Ryan Murray on TRPA staff in particular for spearheading it. Thanks to Crystal Jacobson with Placer County, who kind of co-led the tour and organized it with me. It was really nice to get boots on the ground and get to walk and talk about how policies and real projects interface and where we're at, and see things walking slowly through one of our communities. I think there were some really good discussions and ideas, kind of newer out of the box thinking that came out of it. And I personally would welcome an opportunity to do some similar tours on the ground in other parts of the basin, both commercial core areas, housing projects, or as Garth mentioned, maybe a good model forest fuels treatment project. There's nothing like getting out on the ground and actually seeing real the work getting done, and being able to brainstorm with other people on the committee, especially when we can stir APC and governing board together. I think there's a lot of value. So thanks.
Yeah, agreed. Sounds like we got some field trips coming up. So
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would like to let the commission know, great feedback on the walking tour. And we have, at our monthly staff meeting, we have a board member guest speaker. And our guest speaker yesterday mentioned how much she enjoyed the tour that you put on, Kevin, and wished that we would do more of those. So when you said, let's go take a look at this fire project, my wheels are turning. Like, this could be another APC governing board field tour.
yeah,
Sorry, I keep jumping on.
no problem. Thanks. Miss Simon.
Yes, a couple of things. I also participated in the field tour and would like to thank Crystal and Kevin for all the work that they did, as well as staff. And we had I guess it was a community meeting. I don't know if it was that well attended, with the Calneva project, which I don't believe has gone to TRPA yet. But they kind of showed the community a few of the ideas they have for the remodel, and there appears to be a lot of activity there. And then there's another structure in Crystal Bay that has been kind of a vacant office building. So I saw some activity around there, and the people with the plans in their hands said that they were looking to do workforce housing. So I just wanted to kind of make people aware of that. It's adjacent to the Calneva property, and kind of behind the Crystal Bay Club, which I think owns that parcel. It's not much of a report, but it does look like there's some activity. So I'd like the workforce housing people to kind of be aware of that.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Mr. Young.
Nothing today, but thanks for a good meeting.
Thank you, Eric. Ms. Stoller.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I wanted to let people know that there are some great career opportunities at the Nevada Division of State Lands, specific to Lake Tahoe. We have 3 openings. We have a Nevada Tahoe Resource Team Program Manager position that's available, and that position oversees a multidisciplinary team and inter-department team, and it's somebody's dream job. So I just wanted to let you guys know that that is open. And then reporting to that position are 2 additional positions, our water quality program manager, as well as our Lake Tahoe land agent. So all 3 are posted to the Nevada State Jobs website. And if you know anyone who is looking and you think would be a great fit for that team, please encourage them to apply. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Valerie. Ms. Jacobson?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to echo Kevin's comments on the governing board walking tour. I really enjoyed it and appreciated the opportunity to have the governing board walk with us through Kings Beach. It was I thought a great, just a great event. So thank you all for that. And then I also just wanted to touch on the comments that were made about the communication on emergency preparedness and evacuation, and note that we actually hosted it was our District 5 Board of Supervisor Gustafson, also the chair of governing board. She hosted a town hall on that topic in Placer in August, and the format was great. We had all of our emergency responders there and all kinds of staff, including folks from our forestry division, answering questions, and it was really well received. It went longer than we thought. We had a lot of participation from the community, and we have heard really great things about just the information that we were able to get out to folks, and sort of helped to educate people on what to do in the event of a wildfire. So just want to note that, and happy to share any information about that if anybody's interested. So and then 2 other things to touch on. We have 2 items going before our board in Tahoe. The board of Supervisors is coming to Tahoe on October 17th. And they are going to be taking up 2 items. One is the Tahoe Basin Area Plan amendment package that we've been working on. That went to our Planning Commission in August, and we got a recommendation to forward that onto the board for approval. So that's making its way through the board and then onto TRPA. In addition, we have a technical cleanup item for our short-term rental ordinance that's going to the board on the 17th as well. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Crystal. Mr. Letton?
Yeah, thanks, board chair. Couple things. We are going to have our next board meeting, Hot and Water Board, on October 31st here in Tahoe. Couple items we're going to hear is an update on our climate change mitigation and adaptation strategy. We're also going to hear an update from staff on our Leviathan mine site and some interesting developments there. And then we're also going to hear a proposal for a plan for the West Fork Carson. It's called a vision plan. It's like a alternative to a TMDL. So not directly in the basin, it's might be of interest to folks. And then kind of along those same lines, I'm going to put a pitch in here for recruitment for Hot and Water Board members. We're looking for folks. So, and it particularly, and the reason I bring it up here is because we're looking for more representation from the northern portion of our region, which would include the basin. So I'm just putting a plug in for that. If you have any questions or interest, then contact me offline. That's it.
Thank you, Ben. And we just lost Miss Ferris, so I believe that's everyone. No real update from me, but Crystal got me thinking our board is also trying to meet in Tahoe, and I'll be letting this group know when they set that meeting date, but probably be talking about short-term rentals. And, we are seriously trying to dive into scaling up our Myers area plan to a jurisdiction-wide area plan as well. We're just more and more signs are pointing in the direction that we really need to take that on. And so we're trying to embark on that path. Looking to take advantage of some, I think, of the eventual TRPA affordable housing changes that are coming that were talked about that are going to governing board or our pick, I believe, later this month. So that is it from me. We got it. If I forgot anyone, please let me know. I don't believe I did though. Okay, good. And we are on to basically our last agenda item, which is agenda item 7, closing public interest comments. If any member of the public wishes to address the APC, please raise your hand now by clicking on the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Please keep your comments brief and on point. And please note that we are prohibited by law from taking immediate action on or discussing issues raised by the public that are not listed on our agenda. Just one final plug for TRPA's new email address for public comments. That is publiccomment@trpa.gov. Public comments can be emailed into that email address. And Catherine, I'm going to turn this over to you for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no members of public in the room, and there are no hands raised online to comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. Last agenda item is our adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Thank you all for your engagement. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. We do stand adjourned. It's 11:11. And we will see you next month for at least those 2 items that we discussed. And I hope you all have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.